So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Salary Negotiation, a future Alumni Week event. My name is John Bossler, and I'm a member of the Student Alumni Association's Garnet Circle. Garnet Circle works to foster relationships between students and alumni to prepare students for life after graduation. Future Alumni Week serves this purpose by providing May graduates with all the tools for success through a full week of events. Today, we're focusing on professional development, and we'll have our final session on staying engaged with U of SC as an alumnus tomorrow at noon. We'll also be announcing prize winners based on those who have entered, who have attended the most events throughout the week. You can check out that event and register to reserve your spot at uofscalumni.org/events. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Lauren Brown, Associate Director of Early Alert and Intervention with the Student Success Center, to begin our session.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. I really appreciate it. And good afternoon to everybody who has tuned in. Super excited to be working with y'all for the next hour or so and teach you some skills on salary negotiation. What I am going to do this afternoon and really how this workshop and presentation is going to work during our time together, we're going to talk about a couple of things. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the gender wage gap and why that exists, because that's partially where salary negotiation comes from, is the historical context for understanding that. And then we're going to get into the meat of why should I negotiate my salary, and also like what are the steps for me to be able to do that. But before we get started, if you have just joined us, I put in the chat a link for you all, and I'll put it in here again just in case anybody missed it. Give me just a second here. You all could copy and paste the following link into your web browser. I would really appreciate it. It's going to be AAUW. Just a second. Okay, just typed it in the chat for y'all. If you could take a few minutes to fill that out. And once you are done, if you could just type in the chat for me that you are done, that will be a good sign for me to go ahead and get started. I'll give y'all a couple minutes to fill that out. And then the other thing, I'm putting another link in the chat here. This is your digital workbook. So you were likely emailed by the Alumni Association if you had registered for this workshop, a link for a PDF that's affiliated with the digital workbook that goes along with this workshop, but I do have a digital form as well. So if you just want to click that link to access that digital workbook, you will have access to that during the presentation. It's also something that you can have for after the presentation. The link is not going to expire. So that's something that you'll be able to take advantage of. Thanks, Cameron. I'll wait for a couple more people to type in the chat that they're done, and then I'll take that as a good sign that I can start moving along here. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to take that as a good sign that I can keep moving on. If you're still working on that pre-workshop survey, that is okay. You're not going to be lost in terms of what we are talking about here. But Maggie, if you want to go to slide 4 for me, that would be great. One more. Yep, there you go. So what I want to talk with y'all about first is the gender pay gap. And before I start talking about that, I think it's important to address the elephant in the room. So I know there's probably some people in here that are females, and there's also probably some people in here that are males. And if you are a male and you're thinking gender pay gap, am I in the right place? And the answer is absolutely. So this workshop is for anyone at the University of South Carolina, male or female. And male, like the guys in here, what I would say to you is, while you have more privilege in terms of that gender pay gap and it tends to lean in your favor, you may have an opportunity in the future to be a supervisor or be a manager, and you may have direct reports who are asking to negotiate their salary, ask for raises and promotions and things of that nature. So this is good context for you all to have, to understand that historical context. But also you may go on, later on down the road, you may get married, you may start a family, and you may have a wife or a daughter or things like that. And you're going to want to be able to be a good advocate for the people that are close to you as well. But there's still a lot of room for you all to, learn the same skills that women are learning in this workshop as well. So I just wanted to address that because I know we get a lot of questions at the beginning about that kind of stuff. So this is for everybody. The skill sets are the same. It's just we're addressing that there is a gender pay gap. So Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me, this will talk to us or tell you guys a little bit more about the gender pay gap and what it is. But it's essentially how we describe that inequality in what men and women are paid. So the current pay gap and where it's at, women working full-time compared to men who are also working full-time are paid 82 cents for every dollar that a man is getting paid. So could be the same exact job, could be the same exact experience and things of that nature, but women are making less than what men are getting paid to the dollar. Maggie, if you go to the next slide, this will tell us a little bit about what that looks like when you break it down by race, though. So as y'all can see, based on different identities and racial identities and things of that nature, the gender pay gap can vary drastically by those different races and things like that. So as you can see, for Hispanic and Latina women, it's 54%. So that 82 cents to the dollar is traditionally for like Asian or white women, and then the Hispanic or Latina, it's an even bigger discrepancy. So in the next slide, Maggie, this will tell you a little bit more about the gender pay gap over a woman's career. So as y'all can see, women overall lose just a little bit shy of $500,000, so $406,000 over the course of a 40-year career compared with men overall because of that gender wage gap. Unfortunately, Black women lose just shy of $1 million, so $946,000 over the course of a 40-year career. And again, the Hispanic and Latinas are losing over $1 million. So this is why this workshop exists, is to help raise awareness of this so that we can get people thinking about, again, and provide you all with the tools to negotiate your salaries and feel confident and empowered to advocate for yourself at the table when you guys are going to be alum and you're thinking about those entry-level jobs, but also even after your entry-level jobs, you're going to be asking for raises and promotions and things of that nature. So the other thing that I want to highlight too, y'all don't need to just be thinking about asking for more money at your first job. You're going to be asking for raises and promotions throughout your career as well. So we want to make sure that y'all have this toolkit and skills to be able to do that. So what I want to talk about next, and I want you all to utilize the chat feature here, but what do y'all think are some causes of the gender pay gap? Go ahead and type them in the chat here for me, but if you had to come up with some answers, what do you think? What are some reasons that the pay gap exists? give you a hint, there's some answers on the PowerPoint slide for y'all too. General sexism. Yeah, and that's what Cameron, a lot of the answers that are on this PowerPoint screen here ties in with that. So a lot of times women are just in general paid less for the same work. Another thing is that they're overrepresented in low wage jobs and underrepresented in high wage ones. Kaylin says women are stigmatized to being better doing housework. Absolutely. I'm going to get to that a little bit more too, Kaylin. But going back to this notion that women are overrepresented in low wage jobs and underrepresented in high wage ones, this essentially means, like, when we're talking about low wage jobs, we're thinking about things like education or social work, things of that nature, just generally things that tend to pay less compared to things like tech and engineering and things of that nature. Women are also well represented in overvalued fields, and this kind of goes along the lines of those low wage jobs versus high wage jobs. And women also, lastly, they're discriminated against and face barriers that result in lower pay because they're often seen as caregivers. So Kaylin, kind of going along the line of like the housework or, being a caregiver to a child, a parent, whomever. These are a lot of the reasons why that gender pay gap exists. And there's also this concept of the double bind too. And essentially what the double bind means is women are often seen, it's kind of like black or white. You're either seen as, blunt and stern, or you're seen as likable. It can't be this and that. It has, like, people see it as one or the other, which shouldn't be the case. But there's that concept of the double bind too, which doesn't help. Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me, what I want y'all to do here, because I know y'all are here for a reason, I want you to keep using the chat again. But why are you here? And tell me, what do you see as your biggest challenge in negotiating your salary and benefits in the future here? So I know y'all are interested in this topic, but tell me what makes you apprehensive about it? What makes you nervous about it? What do you see as your biggest challenge? Go ahead and type in the chat for me. All right, I'm seeing evidence to support requesting a higher salary. Good. Yeah, we're going to talk about that plenty of throughout this workshop. I don't know anything about salary and would just love to know more about how I can stick up for myself. Good. And often unsure how to approach the topic. Yeah. And if you haven't had a chance to type in here yet, oh, here's another one. Convincing management that I'm worthy of more pay. Thinking about that for the future makes me nervous. If you haven't had a chance to type in here yet, I'm sure what you're seeing in this chat is probably resonating with some of you. So I want you all to know what you're feeling is completely normal. And that's why these workshops exist. If the world thought that there was only 16 people that were interested in salary negotiation, they probably wouldn't have this workshop. But there are hundreds of thousands of people out there that want to know more about this information. Also, the University of South Carolina is invested in this topic because we know it's important. So just, again, know that your feelings are validated, and it can be it's normal to think that it can be awkward. You don't want somebody to say no to you. You don't want to think that you're not deserving of it, or you don't want an employer to think that you're not deserving of it. So it can be, apprehensive to think about and talk about, but that's what we're going to do during this workshop today. Is I'm going to provide y'all with the tools and the skills to be able to help you have this conversation and kind of debunk some of these myths here. So Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me, what we're going to talk about this afternoon, we're really going to do the first three things, but we're going to talk about how do you know what your value is, and how do you, some of you had mentioned it, that you're not sure how to, have that evidence to support your argument for why you deserve a higher salary or why you deserve a raise or a promotion or things of that nature. So we're going to talk about how do you understand what your value looks like and starting that conversation. We're also going to talk about where do you even start in terms of numbers and things like that? Like, how do I determine what my target salary is going to be when I go in for a negotiation? And then we're also going to talk about your strategy. So I know some of you typed in here that you're not sure about how to even like start the conversation, broach the topic, things like that. So that's what knowing your strategy is going to be about, all about. What verbiage do you use to get that conversation started? And the really nice thing, y'all, your workbook that you have, that digital one, it has a whole bunch of examples in there. And like I said, you get to keep that workbook. It doesn't expire or anything. So if you wanted to print it out, just in case, you could print it out if you prefer hard copies. But that's got a lot of good stuff in there, again, about how to reference this stuff afterwards outside of just what I'm going to be talking to you about. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is know your value. So Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me and go to one more. What I want y'all to think about is your resume. I am assuming everyone on the Zoom call has a resume. So in terms of where I'm trying to get at with this, though, you want to make sure the position that you are applying for lines up with your resume. So what I would recommend, and folks in the Career Center, Darla Moore School of Business, Office of Career Management, I know we've got different career centers on campus. I know they would recommend this as well, but you all essentially want to have like one master resume for you as like an internal resume for yourself. It could be 2 to 3 pages at this point. I know I have an internal resume for myself that's probably 4 to 5 pages at this point. But when I go apply for a job, I'm not going to turn in a resume that's 4 to 5 pages. What I'm doing is, if I'm looking for a job, I'm looking at that position description in the job posting, and I'm going to make a specific resume for that job that I'm applying to, and basically pick and choose things from my like internal master resume that make the most sense for that job that I'm applying to. So you want to make sure that you have a tailored resume basically for every single position that you're applying to. Now, if you are applying to a lot of accounting jobs, that resume is like for the accounting jobs is probably going to look very similar for other accounting jobs that you're looking for. But like, just in case you were going from, some accounting jobs to some marketing jobs, then your resume might look a little bit different. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that you have a tailored resume. And even, with cover letters and things like that, making sure that you're addressing things from the job posting. Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me. You can go to the next one as well. And what I want y'all to think about next, in terms of knowing your value, you got to think about a couple of things when you go in for that conversation and just getting those initial thoughts off the top of your head. But thinking about yourself in the workplace, what differentiates yourself? If you're on a team, how do you differ from your other teammates? How do you bring value to your company or organization? What value do you bring? And I can tell you, as somebody that hires undergraduate students in the Student Success Center, I know when we are doing peer leader interviews and things like that, one of the things that we're answering at the end, yes, it's, can this person do the job? Yes or no. But the other thing that we're answering is, what value does so-and-so bring to this position? And then the other thing that y'all are going to want to be thinking about is, what skills or accomplishments or work experiences demonstrate value or the contributions you'll make in the position that you're seeking. So those are some of the things that you're going to want to ask yourself. So what I want y'all to do, Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me, if y'all have a piece of paper, or you can probably do it in your workbook. There's like plenty of space in there for you to do it. What I want y'all to do, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes, and I want you to write down as many accomplishments, contributions, skills, or relevant work experience that you have that you're proud of for a job that you would be thinking about applying to in the future. So some examples, this could be like finishing a big project. It could be accepting an award. It could be, I know a lot of y'all as students do case studies and things like that. If you won like a case study competition, What are some things that you are particularly proud of? I'll give you about 2 minutes to get that written out. And basically what we're going to do from there, after you write down all of your accomplishments, I'm going to help you translate that to what's called a value statement. And that's what's going to help you direct this conversation with a future employer. I'll give you about 30 to 45 more seconds. I'm writing mine down too. All right, Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me, this is going to be a template of how to help yourself articulate your value. So basically the 3 things that I want y'all to be thinking about to help you articulate your value are your accomplishments, your skills, and your results. So thinking about that brainstorm that you just did where you wrote down what you're most proud of during your time here at Carolina, that can help you in terms of having starting that conversation for knowing your worth and knowing your value. I want everybody to write down a value statement that you have for yourself. I have just written one and I'll share that. And I'm also going to ask for some people to share in the chat as well, but I will do mine first. So mine, for example, I work in the Student Success Center, as John mentioned during the introduction. And what I do some work with financial literacy and money management, but the other side of the house that I work on is with our alerts and progress report process. So we identify classes that are historically challenging on campus, and we encourage faculty to submit alerts on behalf of students who may not be doing well, and because we want to reach out to those students and let them know, hey, we care about you. And also here's tutoring or SI or things like that to help you get connected with that class and stay on top of that content. So you can pass the class and graduate on time and things of that nature. So for me, if I'm articulating my value when it comes to that stuff, something that I would say is I accomplished a 15% increase in alerts submitted by instructors this past academic year using my listening and communication skills, hearing from faculty about changes that they wanted to be made to the process, but also doing presentations and detailed emails to instructors about how to participate in the progress report process. And this benefited not only the Student Success Center, but the University of South Carolina, because we know if we're able to make contact with students at the very least, they're more likely to finish with a higher grade in the class compared to students that we don't make contact with. So that would be my value statement. So what I want you all to do from there is write down your value statement. So I'm going to give you about a minute to do that. But once you're done, I want some people to go ahead and type it in the chat and I'll give you some feedback. And y'all, the biggest thing that I can tell you with this, I know it can be awkward to, have yourself do a value statement, ask for a raise and things of that nature. But if you practice with me on here, it's going to make it so much easier when you go and do it in real life. So I encourage everybody to type in a value statement. It'll make it that much easier when you have to do it, potentially in 2 months if you're graduating, another year if you're a junior, so on and so forth. So give you about a minute to do that. Yay, Haven, thank you. All right. Haven says, I hosted our office's 5K using my personal interest with running, paired with my creativity and attention to detail, which benefited our company by raising money for our scholarship fund. Hey, Haven, I don't even have feedback. That was perfect. You talked about, the thing that I really like is you talked about your personal interest with running and making that tie in with work. But then you were able, the only feedback I would really give you is if you're able to qualify or quantify how much money was raised based on that 5K. That's it though. Other than that, it's great. Anyone else got one? See, y'all, it's not that bad. It's not that bad to share. All right, Kaylin says, my time with my internship and GMG helped me improve my copywriting and social media skills. I assisted in increasing awareness and expanding our audience through social media and the platform. So Kaylin, I would give you the same feedback that I gave to Haven. And I would say if you're able to quantify like whether it's a percentage or like percent increase or what number of followers the place that you were interning started with versus like where it ended once you were done with your internship. That's the only thing that I would add to it. That's great though. All right, looking for 1 to 2 more, y'all. Then we can move on to the next part of this workshop. Give y'all about 10 seconds in case anybody's got another one, and then I'll move on. All right, we're going to go to the next slide here. So the next thing that we are going to talk about is step 2 of negotiating your salary, which is thinking about that target salary in your range. Maggie, if you go to the next slide, but before we talk about that target salary in your range, just some things to think about with that value statement. And this has been really helpful for me as well. First thing, document your accomplishments. And that kind of goes along the line of that master resume that I was talking about. Make sure with that master resume, you're documenting every, club that you've participated in, volunteer experience that you've participated in, work experience, internship experience, even if it's, a task or a job that isn't really going to be relevant to your career field, up until probably, and I am much older than y'all, but up until maybe 7 years ago, I had worked at a movie theater when I was in college, and I had that on my resume, for actual jobs that I was applying to up until about 7 years ago, because there was a lot of transferable skills that tied with it and things like that. So make sure you have everything documented so that you don't forget about it. I would recommend doing that quarterly, is updating that master resume and making sure all of that is documented, but also think beyond the tasks. So a lot of times we can get in the weeds of the day-to-day, but think about how your role and how that fits into the bigger picture of a company that you're working for, that you've interned with, things of that nature. And I mentioned this with Kaylin and Haven's examples, but quantify your work. So bring data to the conversation if you can. And then the last thing, everything counts. So if you are a team player, you're signing up to do things on the weekends or evenings and things of that nature, all of that stuff matters. And a lot of times that's where things like having leverage to negotiate a salary and things of that nature can really come into play. And that's based on experience as well. So keep that in the back of your mind. Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me, and I think you can even click one more. Yep. So what we're going to talk about next are the 6 steps to benchmarking your salary and benefits. So we're going to walk through these 6 things together. And the first one is going to be research and identify comparable job titles. Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me, the website, or before I get there, when you're setting your target salary, your worth and the number that you're going to be looking at is based on objective market wage data. But you're also going to want to have a range when you are going in to negotiate your salary. When you are having a conversation with a future supervisor or manager or things like that, or even HR, you may be doing it with a recruiter. It really just depends on the career field that you are going into, but you are going to want to provide what's called a range. You're not going to want to just give them one figure. You're going to want to give them a range. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But your target salary, that's going to be your one figure, but that will be at the bottom of your range. And again, we're going to talk more about that. So the three things you're going to want to have: the target salary range, and then you're also going to want to have a walkaway point. And that's the lowest salary that you are willing to accept and still want to work for that company and be in that position. It's a tool to help you prevent accepting a salary that you may later regret. And we're going to talk about how to identify that walkaway point as well. Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me. So when we talk about, that step of researching and identifying a comparable job title, what we recommend in terms of a good website to use is what's called salary.com. And y'all may be familiar with Glassdoor and things like that, but the reason we recommend salary.com is because this is employer-driven data, whereas Glassdoor is employee-reported data. So if it's employer-reported data, it's coming from applicant tracking systems and things like that. It's coming from annual reports, and it tends to be more accurate than Glassdoor. So that's why we recommend salary.com. And I'm going to go ahead and type it in the chat here for y'all if you want to check it out. But this is a good website. I've done a lot of researching in here and things like that. But what you'll do in this website is you will essentially type in a job title or keyword as well as the location. So something else to remember is, like, if you were to type in, like Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me. So the example that they have here is public relations specialist 1. So that could be something that you would type into salary.com as either the job title or the keyword. And again, that's helpful because it looks at it from different points throughout the country or the world for that matter. But if you type in public relations specialist 1 for Columbia, South Carolina, your salary in Columbia, South Carolina for that job title is going to look a lot different. Whereas if you were going to type public relations specialist 1 into Washington, D.C. or New York City, for example, or California, because the cost of living is higher there. So that's why it's important to be thinking about not only the job title, but where you want to be working, because it could be a pay difference of $15,000, $20,000 based on cost of living. So that's why you want to make sure that you're really honing in on the location. Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me. So this shows you what the median annual salary range is for somebody who would be in good command or good control of their job. That median annual salary for a public relations specialist 1 is $49,343. So this would be that median annual salary is what we would suggest if you are in full command of your job and you're doing good work. This is where we would want you to use be thinking about this figure for the target salary. So that's just the one figure, that 49,343, but y'all can see too, and it's based on years of experience and things of that nature. There's a whole bunch of different things that it looks into. Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me. So then you want to be thinking about that target salary range. So I'm using my calculator on my phone here because what y'all are going to want to do. So if that target salary range was, or that target salary was around $49,000, what you want to do for your range, y'all, is you want to stretch it upwards. So you want your target salary to be at the bottom or the anchor of your range. So your range, for example, would be, hear me out, hold on. Doing math. So like, let's say you wanted to have a range somewhere around 10% of that $49,000. So your range would be that 49,343 to 53,900. So you could go into a conversation with a future employer, manager, supervisor, and give them, and say something in regards to, I'm looking for somewhere between $49,000 and $54,000. We recommend a range, and the reason why is because it makes y'all look more flexible versus if you just go in with a number, it doesn't make you look as flexible. And the other thing too, if you put your target salary at the bottom of that anchor and then you stretch it upwards, you really what the employer is probably thinking is you want that higher number, which it would be awesome if you got that, right? But because your target salary is at the bottom, you guys would be more than happy with that target salary. So they think of it again as being more flexible. So that's why we suggest a range. And the other thing, how far you stretch it, it's never recommended that you stretch it more than 20%. So for my example, I did 10%, which got me to around $54,000. But how far you stretch it up between that 0% and that 20% really just depends on, again, your value statements, what you think you bring to the table. You can be thinking about your performance reviews. And if you are performing every year and at an exceptional rate, for example, if you're doing salary negotiation from the perspective of asking for a raise and you've already been working for the company, or you can be thinking about previous, the performance reviews at an internship or something, you can bring those to the table. So stretch it, but you can never, I don't want to say you can never stretch it more than 20%. We don't recommend going above 20%. So that's just something to keep in mind there. Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me. You can go to the next one too. So the last thing that we're going to talk about here is determining that walk away point. So let's say that you get let's say that you get a job offer, you get your offer letter over email and things like that, and you have a conversation about what you're looking for in terms of being compensated, and they come back to you and it's below what your target salary was. The other thing that you want to determine is that walk away point or that resistance point. What is the lowest salary that you are willing to take in order to take that job? And how you determine a resistance or a walk away point is by having a budget. And that's a lot of the work that we do in the Student Success Center, y'all. We have a money management program. It is based out of Columbia Hall on the first floor, but we talk to students about things like basic budgeting, building and managing credit, all of those things. But what I want y'all to think about with a budget does, when we think about it, it's a tool, a plan, a guide to help you balance your income. So the money that you have coming in and the expenses, the money that you have going out. But you want to be thinking about doing a monthly budget and be thinking about your income. So and thinking about the offer letter that you have, being able to break down that offer letter or that salary to think about what your monthly take-home pay is going to be. And what we recommend in terms of a good website for that, I'm going to go ahead and type it in here. It's called paycheckcity.com. And this does a really good job. It's it's a similar idea to salary.com, but instead of looking at salaries, it looks at what your paycheck would be. And then it breaks it down by taxes and things like that based on the location that you're going to be in. So it helps you calculate that take home pay. But then you're also going to want to be thinking about what bills do you have and things of that nature. And I'm just going to be completely transparent here. If you are looking at entry-level jobs, there may be budgets that companies have that they have to stick to, and you just really need to make a decision. Okay, is this experience that I'm getting from this position, and even if I only do it for a year just to get this experience because it's really good experience, is this worth me doing that? Or do you need to find something else that's going to be more helpful for you in terms of your budget and allow you to live the lifestyle that you want to live? So I would encourage y'all to really be thinking about your resistance or walk away point. And that's just even for a figure in general, but also start working on what your budget's going to look like after graduation. If you are close to graduation, thinking about, where are you going to be living? What kind of bills are you going to have in terms of student loans, rent, car payments, things like that. So we want to make sure that you're prepared to have that conversation. And if you need help talking more about what your budget would look like, and if you need help determining, what your resistance or walk away point would be, we are happy to meet with you in the Student Success Center. So feel free to schedule an appointment through our office. But some other things that y'all can think about too, is sometimes you are able to negotiate benefits. And a lot of times that's where companies may have more wiggle room versus being able to, do more with a salary or things like that. So Maggie, if you go to the next slide, you can stay on that one for a second, Maggie, but I want y'all to type in the chat here. What are some benefits that y'all think you could negotiate for a future job? What are some benefits out there, and what do you think y'all could potentially negotiate out there? Yeah, so Cameron says vacation days, sick days, things of that nature. Those are absolutely things that you can negotiate depending on how the company's set up. And sometimes there's companies out there that pile it all together and you just have PTO, paid time off, and that includes vacation days and sick days. I've seen situations where that's been the case and people have asked for it to be split up. So that's one thing that y'all could do. What are some other things outside of vacation days and sick days? What else can you negotiate benefit-wise? Yep, medical and dental, any kind of insurance, health insurance, life and disability insurance, those may be some things. Tiffany, yeah, let's talk about COVID. I know we're hopefully getting our necks out of the woods with COVID, but yeah, we are moving in the future. Like the future of work is working from home and being able to do remote work if you are able to do that remotely. So even if it's not necessarily every day, 5 days a week, but even if you can do 1 to 2 days a week, that may be something that you're able to negotiate. You guys can probably see here, I am working from home, and I am grateful that I have a job that allows me to work from home a couple days a week. And I'm still able to get things done. What else, y'all? What are some other things that you can negotiate? I'll get some other things to think about as well. So, family and medical leave as well. So vacation days, sick days, we've talked about that, but there's other kinds of leave too. If you have family in the future, things like that, family leave, professional development. So depending on where you're going to be working, asking for a professional development fund to be able to go. I know with my role, I'm able to go to 2 conferences a year. And that's something that I'm really grateful for. But if that's an option for you, even if it's not, being able to negotiate for that and asking what the funds are for professional development, retirement and investment plans, tuition reimbursement. So if you are thinking about, you're going to be graduating with your bachelor's, let's say, and you're going to go work for a firm or something, and you want to eventually go get your MBA, I'm just using that as an example. The company may potentially, give tuition reimbursements for some classes and things like that. I know another popular one, if you are moving across the country, would be moving expenses. So that is something that can be costly upfront, but you could potentially get reimbursed for that, which is really nice. I know flex time is another popular benefit as well. And flex time is essentially, for those of you that aren't familiar with that, if you are scheduled to work 40 hours a week, but your company doesn't allow overtime, for example, but let's say you worked 45 hours that week because you did an event in the evening, or you did an event on a weekend or something, you can flex that time either like that week or the next week to, come in late one day or leave early another day. So I know that's something that my office does at USC, which is really nice. And then the other thing I'll say too, and this was really popular during COVID, when, especially for companies that weren't making as much money during COVID, just based on what the mission of their company was. And they may not have been able to reward people or compensate people in terms of raises and things like that, but instead they gave people title changes to show their commitment to those people instead. So I know that's something that was really popular during COVID. But if that's important to you as a title change, that can be something that you negotiate as well. There's a lot of different options out there that y'all can take advantage of. And a lot of times companies can be more lenient with the benefits. And if you can negotiate those things, a lot of times that will offset if you aren't able to negotiate in terms of an actual dollar amount. So keep that in the back of your mind. All right, Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me, this is some of the benefits to consider. I think I went through most of these. So Maggie, go ahead and go to the next slide. And this is going to be the last thing that we talk about is knowing your strategy. Maggie, go ahead and go to the next slide for me. So I know a lot of you had talked about this is something that you were apprehensive about or nervous about with negotiating your salary is the actual conversation. So some of you may know the dollar amount, you know what you want to ask for, you know what you bring to the table. It's just having that conversation, which I know it can be nerve-wracking. And again, the thing that I will tell you is the more and more you practice, the more and more you think about like questions that an employer can like ask you when they're asked, like starting to be thinking about like what your range is and stuff like that. The more you're prepared, the better off you're going to be and the more confident you're going to be able to advocate for yourself and things of that nature. And I can tell you based on experience, again, the more prepared you are, the better it's going to be. So some tips to keep in the back of your mind when you are negotiating a salary. Feel free to bring your notes, especially, I mean, if it's an in-person meeting, don't be afraid to bring a notebook. If it's a virtual conversation that you're having, it's a little bit easier to have your notes because you're not face-to-face with somebody and you can have it off to your side. But feel free to bring your notes, even if it's an in-person meeting. The other thing, remain flexible and positive. Being that flexible piece, again, that's where that target salary range comes in versus just having a set dollar amount. So being flexible, but also being positive. The other thing to remember too is that negotiation is not a battle, it's a conversation. Don't get personal. So if you are trying to negotiate your salary in the back of your mind, it's because you have student loans or it's because your roommate moved out on you and you have to pay rent on your own or things like that. Your employer does not want to know the reasons why. So just leave the personal reasons out of it and just get to the point of what you're looking for. And the other thing I'll say too, remember that your employer, so whether you're talking to a recruiter, whether you're talking to your potential new supervisor or manager, remember, they've picked you. They want you to work for their company. So a lot of times it's about, selling to you as much as it is you have sold yourself to them. And if they've made an offer to you, it's because they want you to be there. So most of the time, intentions are good and they're going to try. But sometimes there's politics and there's red tape that can hold that process up. But remember that they have picked you and they want to make it work if they can make it work. And then lastly, anticipate your employer's reactions and responses. So we're going to talk about some of those reactions and responses during the rest of this presentation here. So if you go to the next slide, Maggie, these are the 3 common questions that you're going to be asked when you're starting to have that conversation about salaries. So the first thing is, can you please tell me your salary history? That's going to be one of them. 2, what are your salary expectations? And 3, I need to know what salary you want in order to make an offer. So a couple of things. That first question, can you tell me your salary history? Not in the state of South Carolina, but there are some states out there, and I think it's directly in your workbook, where it's actually illegal to ask that question. It's not in the state of South Carolina, but there are some states where they cannot ask. And I don't know the page off the top of my head in the workbook, but I do know the workbook does have what states it is illegal. So that's something for you to keep in the back of your mind. But regardless, these 3 questions, there's a common theme. And what the employer is trying to do here is get you to share your dollar amount first. So if you are going to take anything away from this presentation today, I want you to remember 2 things. The first thing we've already talked about, and it's have a range versus just $1 amount. But the second thing is, if you can avoid at all costs you sharing your dollar amount, try to hold off on that as long as possible and try to deflect to get the employer to share their what they've budgeted for the position. So those are the two things that I want y'all to remember. And again, that second one is try to get the employer to give you a dollar amount before you give a dollar amount. All right, Elsa has a question. What if to apply for the job, you have to apply salary expectations? Great question. So what I would recommend, I would either put 0, I would put NA, like not applicable. If it makes you put in an actual dollar amount, which most of the time it won't based on my experience, but if there are some companies out there that have like an algorithm where you have to actually type in like 5 characters, I guess, go ahead and put your target salary in there. But I would try to put 0. I would try to put NA. And at the very least, if that's not an option, then go ahead and put the target salary. But at the very least, you're trying your best to deflect that to get the employer to share first what they've budgeted for the position. That's a really good question. Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me, these are some examples of how to respond. And these are all in your workbook. If you want to take pictures of these, feel free to, but they're also in your workbook so that you have some verbiage. But let's say, for example, someone does ask for your salary history. These are some ways that you can deflect. So you can say something like, this position is not exactly the same as my last job, and I'd like to discuss what my responsibilities would be here first, and then determine a fair salary for this job. That's one thing you can say. You can say, I'd appreciate it if you make me an offer based on whatever you've budgeted for the position, and we can go from there. Or the last thing, another good example, my salary history and expectations are in line with my professional achievements and experience with the requirements of the position. So your response really just kind of depends on how bold you are and how confident you are. But any of the 3 of these would be good ways to respond to that question. Maggie, go ahead and click the next slide for me. Let's say the employer asks for your salary expectations. These are some good responses as well. So you can say, I'd like to see if I'm a good fit first before we discuss salary. You could say, I'd like to learn more about the role before I set my salary expectations. And as we move forward in the interview process, I would expect that my salary would line up with market rates for similar positions in this area or this region. And then another good example would be, I'd appreciate it if you made me an offer on what's budgeted for the role, and we can go from there. And again, you'll notice all of these are ways to deflect to get the employer to come up with a dollar amount first. And then Maggie, if you go to the next slide for me, let's say you got the job. Awesome. Congratulations. What happens next? We want to make sure, obviously you are negotiating your salary or benefits if you are able to, and you're, doing the deflecting and things like that. Maggie, go to the next slide for me, but we want to make sure a couple other things happen too. So let's say the employer says something about, I don't have the budget for this high of a salary. If these are some ways to respond to that. So if that's the case, you can say, if that's the case, would you be open to us working together to identify ways to cover this salary this year or to plan for increased funds next year? You could say, would you be open to discussing including an increase for me next year? Can we talk about benefits or other non-monetary benefits? And I absolutely understand our budget constraints, but with my work history, I've demonstrated success in saving our company money. If not now, do you think we can revisit this in 6 months for a review? So the theme here with this one is, if a employer, can't budge on the salary, the biggest thing that I would recommend when you get a job offer and they can't do that, one, you obviously want to make sure that you get the job offer in writing, but as part of that job offer, have them, as part of that job offer letter, make sure that they are putting in there basically that there is the opportunity to review, performance review in 6 months to revisit that salary conversation. So that's something else that you can keep in the back of your mind. Another thing that y'all can do too, I'm trying to think what else. Again, we've talked about the non-monetary benefits. So if there's ways to negotiate there, again, maybe they don't have room to budge with the actual salary, but they may be able to add a few extra days for vacation time. They may be able to do professional development funds because that comes out of a different budget than salaries come out of. So that's another thing to be thinking about too. Sometimes salaries come out of X budget and they may not have wiggle room there, but there's another budget for professional development funds and they can, take money from that to give you more for professional development. It really just depends on how the company's set up, if it's public, if it's private, things of that nature. Again, make sure that you get the offer in writing. And really, those are the steps to negotiating your salary. So again, just to review what we've talked about, there's 3 steps. So knowing your value and having that value statement. For those of you that shared earlier, you did a great job with that. The second thing is knowing your target salary and having that target salary range. So that what number are you going to go into the conversation with? What range are you going to go in for the conversation? And then the last thing is knowing your strategy. How are you going to actually talk about this with a recruiter, a potential supervisor and things like that, and what to do if they are trying to get you to share a number first and how to have that conversation. So with that, I'm going to open up the floor for any questions. Go ahead. I'll give you some time to type in the chat. What questions do you have? I'm happy to answer things as I'm able to. And if I need some more time to research some stuff, I'll let you know if I need more time to research stuff, but I will most definitely get back to you. But go ahead and type whatever questions y'all have in the chat here. I have the same workbook that y'all have, so I'm going to see if I missed anything. You are so welcome. Thank you. You're welcome. Y'all, let me know if you have any questions. Happy to stay on for a few extra minutes, so let me know what questions y'all have. Looking to see if I missed anything though. Yeah, there is, Elsa, I think it was you that asked about the online applications. There's a page 13 in the workbook has a section on online applications and what to put in, and it's got the stuff about putting 0 or NA if you can, but if not, then put your target salary. Cameron says, my question was also going to be about listing salary expectations before the job. So yep, you're welcome. Yep, it's on workbook page 13. So there's a bunch of good stuff in here. Before y'all go, because it looks like we don't really have any questions. If you have been in a non-paid position, okay, if you've been in a non-paid position, do all of what was discussed applicable to negotiation? Kaylin, are you applying to a job within the same company, or are you just thinking about your experience in applying to a different company, but the experience is volunteer based? Then I would say it's applicable. Absolutely. And that's natural for y'all as college students. So you're going to have volunteer opportunities. You're going to have sometimes non-paid internships and things like that. But they honestly, they don't need to know that you weren't paid. So happy to take any more questions. You are welcome. If y'all don't mind, remember at the beginning of this, you did a pre-workshop survey. If you don't mind doing the post-workshop survey, I just went ahead and typed it in the chat for me. If y'all could fill that out, it would be very much appreciated. We want to know how much you learned in terms of salary negotiation and things like that. And we're always looking for ways to improve. And the only way that I know how to improve these conversations if I know what's working and what's not. So if y'all could fill that out for me, I would really, really appreciate it. And once you are done with that, feel free to sign off. And again, thank you all so much for being here. It's much appreciated. And I'll happily hang out I'm just going to mute myself, but I will happily hang out for a couple more minutes in case anyone has questions. You're so welcome. Thank you. You're welcome. Thanks for coming. You're welcome. Thanks for participating. All right, y'all, I am going to pop off, but I am typing my email address in the chat. So if y'all have any questions, specifically for your, unique situation, whatever you have going on, feel free to send me an email and I will happily do my best to help you. But thanks again, y'all, so much for participating. Past hour was great and I wish you all the best of luck.